Senator Heyliger, you may proceed with your introduction.
Good morning to my colleagues. Good morning to the people of this territory. First, I would like to say thank you to my colleagues who have engaged me with extensive dialogue as it relates to this piece of legislation. One of the things that I had recognized that as a predominantly Afro-Caribbean, Afro-American community, at first when I first started to have conversations with members of this community about the need for an act such as this, I at first thought it was a moot situation, because we as a people just assume that because of our skin tone, we are the majority, but we do not realize that we are also the minority in many areas when it comes to social and economic situations. Unfortunately, one of the things that is God-given to us, such as our skin tone, our hair texture, are oftentimes utilized in a way as a race-based situation to discriminate against us. And after speaking to many in this community and recognizing that this has been a problem for so many of them, while so many of them were clueless that it was even happening in our community, I felt that even a piece of legislation such as this that could assist with making sure that when it comes to your race, when it comes to something that you have no control over, I don't have the right, after my parents decided that I would be here, I can't go back and undo it. I cannot go back and undo the skin color. I cannot go back and undo my hair texture. But when we live in a society that just a short years ago, your skin tone was used to stop you from even elevating in a society, and as we shifted away from that, we have now started to use things as people's hair texture. That is something we cannot allow to be advanced in our society. This Crown Act movement is something not only that I would like to see happen here locally, it is something that's being pushed nationally. I think many states and the almost 20 states that have already enacted legislation to deal with discriminatory actions towards people of color, they see what needs to be done. And I am hoping today that my colleagues understand that something might not happen to you personally, but we have to represent the entire masses. And if there's even one person that's headed to a job that's being told that you don't deserve to be here, or you could be fired, or I will put you out of this job because I decided that the way you're here, that naturally comes out of your body and the way you choose to carry it, groomed, is not good enough for our society that has chosen often to adopt a Eurocentric style. I am simply asking that my colleagues, that when we have discussed this previously in the Education Committee, we talked about a lot of things and how certain aspects of this bill needed to be amended. And in my attempts to do so, and even on the floor at the time, I tried to explain certain aspects. One of the things that on the floor that day that my colleagues had suggested as an amendment to this piece of legislation was to include the word employment to make sure that everyone understood that it also covered the workplace. One of the things I tried to explain, and I'm taking the time out, I pulled up the law itself. The reason why we never specifically put the word employment in the legislation is that the chapter that we are amending already references it. So we only in this piece of legislation reference the areas we were attempting to change, because we're attempting to change Title 10, Chapter 1, Section 2 and 3, but also in the VI Code as it stands right now, Section 3A1, Title 10, Chapter 1 says, A, all natural persons within the jurisdiction of the United States Virgin Islands, without regards to race, creed, color, or national origin, and subject only to the conditions and limitations established by law and applicable in like manner to all persons are entitled to 1, equal treatment with respect to employment, pay, and working conditions in and all businesses and industry, and with respect to union membership. So because I was not attempting to amend that section of the code, which is already there, that is the reason why we never put it in here. So there's nothing really for me to amend when it already exists in that section. The other concern some of my colleagues had shared had to do with if we do go ahead and process this piece of legislation to protect and place your natural born God-given hair textures under the fact of your race, they were concerned about agencies that have laws that could supersede this for like health reasons or reasons where, for health reasons and other reasons of safety and other things. And one of my colleagues had suggested that we add in the word OSHA into the code. When we attempted to go and look within the code, and that was something else we tried to express, that particular section of the law already has discussion to establish law that would easily supersede this. Now, I would like to read that section that says section 3B. No person being the owner, proprietor, superintendent, manager, agent, or employee of any publicly licensed business or any other business or industrial establishment shall directly, indirectly, by subterfuge, deny employment in or at such business to any applicant, therefore, or engage in or permit any discrimination or differential in pay or working conditions for workers doing the same work on account of race, creed, color, or national origin, subject only to the conditions and limitations established by law and applicable in like manner to all persons. When we checked with legal and checked with, it was shared that one particular line covers laws that are already in existence that could potentially supersede this. So to now put in just the word OSHA, when there might be other federal agencies that could already supersede for safety and health purposes, it was not something necessary when the law already spoke to specific aspects that could already supersede in cases of these. This piece of legislation is not only important to me, but to many people that have been discriminated against in our community. I don't think a lot of times when we hear of, I'm going back to the conversations that took place during the last hearing when some colleagues were concerned that, I grew up and I never had this issue. I could always comb my hair the way I want to. I could always do this, but that's something personal to you. As a representative, I reach out and I speak to individuals and understand what happened to them. And if enough people are saying, Senator, this is something that is happening in schools, it is happening in workplaces, you start to look at the demographics and the numbers and question, if we're saying that this should not be a problem because the majority of the people in this territory are of African descent, look at it from the perspective of who runs the majority of the businesses. When I had to hear the story of an individual that worked at a hotel in St. John, that she was threatened consistently to cut off her locks that she chose to wear, when we here in this same establishment have senators at the highest that do wear their natural hair, why should the very people we represent be threatened in the workplace to not be allowed to wear their hair once it's groomed? We're not questioning whether the situation has to do with if you just want to wear your natural hair. I am speaking specifically to the ability to wear it, but I am not going to feel that anyone should say, well, because your hair is natural and you just wake up, that your hair shouldn't be groomed. Because that was also another concern of one of my colleagues, where it was grooming versus natural hair. That is not the issue. I am simply asking my colleagues today to really recognize that this is happening here in our community. This is happening to our people, and this is something that I am asking you to support. There are many people across the nation that are backing legislation such as this, and I have shared that in almost 20 states they have already enacted laws to protect against the discrimination based on race as it relates to your hair texture. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, Delta Sigma Theta, Alpha Kappa Alpha, Sigma Gamma Rho, Zeta Phi Beta, Link, Jackson Jill of America, the National Black Caucus of State Legislatures. All of these people stand in unison. Over 85 businesses, over 85 corporations and organizations have recognized throughout the United States and territories that unfortunately, as much as we have advanced, as much as we have moved forward, some of these things still happen to us. And I'm simply asking that my colleagues really look at this as a way to make sure that if even one person in our society is being discriminated against, we don't let it happen. So I would like to ask for your support, and thank you very much for listening to my plea on behalf of the people of this territory.
Thank you very much, Senator Francis Heyliger. Alma Francis Heyliger. Senator Heyliger, you're recognized for your introduction.
Good morning once again, colleagues. As it relates to Bill number 34-0147, this piece of legislation has been before this body, and this is the third time, and I am hoping that the third time is a charm. This piece of legislation is requesting that the Board of Elections, 149, trying to make sure I have two bills in front of me. This piece of legislation speaks to the Board of Elections and asking to change a specific section in the code that has been on the book since 1963. Currently, in the VI code, there's a piece of legislation that speaks to public records and only registered voters being able to go in and getting copies and being able to inspect public election records. One of the things that I have noted in our society is that even though we have over 50,000+ people registered to vote, every election time we are limited to some 20-something thousand showing up. One of the things in coming to this institution and speaking to the public, they are looking for ways to get access to information in their attempts to understand and better feel comfortable with their right to vote, in knowing that their right and their vote is secured. And for me, this measure is just another step forward to lending to transparency. We have discussed this several times within this body. It was held twice. And I went back and I took note and spoke to several of my colleagues, and I asked them, can you please pay attention and really look to what the people are asking for? Some of the things in the last meeting that they had concerns with, and even speaking with Ms. Fox, that she came and shared her concerns. The biggest issue, because I attempted to create and draft a bill to open access to public information as it relates to election records. Unfortunately, in several attempts to do so, the same message keep coming up from my colleagues Some of them were concerned about being totally open to the public because as the current law is written, it is only limited to registered voters. As an attempt to compromise and still get information out to the public, my piece of legislation currently now includes all registered voters. And after speaking to colleagues as well as listening to the testimony, and specifically some of the concerns where they felt that if you left the records just open to the public, some individuals will come in for malicious reasons, collect the data and information to sell for commercial purposes. Now, I'm going to sit here and say this to you. Whether somebody is registered or unregistered, it is up to the human being whether they have malicious purposes or not. But in our attempts to protect and make sure that there are some limitations, during the testimony of Ms. Fox, she did share with us that she does not believe commercial use, and I'm going to quote, commercial use does not include scholarly, journalistic, political, including political fundraising, or governmental purposes, media uses, or candidate uses. We spoke about this on the floor, and we talked about referencing a California law that spoke to these things. So in my attempt to have a form of compromise to allow for this to be a little bit more open to get information onto the internet so the public could access, but the information that people have to walk in, sign up for, and register will continue to be limited to registered voters, in addition to the public that comes in and requests it for the purposes, and I want to say specifically for the purposes of election, scholarly, journalistic, political, or governmental purposes. And if they do come in and make those requests, the information, once they fill out the form like they currently do right now, and the information that we are requesting, physical address, their mailing address, contact information. This is a form that was shown to us here on the Senate floor by the Supervisor of Elections that is currently being used, basically the same information. And as a compromise, we have limited it to those things that she shared she does not believe is for commercial use. So I'm asking my colleagues to at least allow a law that has been sitting on the books for almost 60 years to be updated in a way that we can move to modern times, give people access to more information, and allow them to be able to see the transparency of this government in our attempts as lawmakers to do better. Thank you very much, and I ask for your support.
Thank you very much, Senator Francis Heyliger. Senator Francis Heyliger, you're recognized.
I do appreciate, Mr. Chair, that you did bring that up, and if it's a concern to clean that up, that is something I would be more than happy to amend. But since we have legal counsel on the floor, through the chair, could legal counsel please share with us what would be necessary, if any, because how it's written, from what our intention was, and what the law, how it's written, it says, I have the wrong one. I apologize, I picked up the two wrong amendments.
You want it?
Pass the one copy. Thank you. I have so much paper. How it is, what our intention was in the way it was written and through the chair to legal counsel, I want to ask if there's a difference when you reference the word such documents as opposed to just any documents. Now, it says the records are open for public. When we spoke about this earlier, what the current law actually says right now, that it is only limited 100% to only registered voters. The attempt of this legislation, part of it was to open information to the public. And like I said, after speaking, the concern was it just being open-ended. So what we did is we added in this section that says the records are open to the public inspection for election, scholarly, journalistic, political, and governmental purposes, and the board shall provide copies of such documents to any member of the public no later than 10 business days. And also at the end, it speaks to the normal form that they utilize. What I would like to know from legal counsel, if anything would have to be altered, or when it references such documents, it goes back to the documents that are being required specifically under those limitations. Or would this now open it still to anybody, or when it says such documents, it goes back to documents that are requested for elections, journalistic, political, and governmental purposes?
Through the chair to Senator Heyliger. Such documents would be the documents that are being requested. And by adding in certain categories that you just put in there, like, for example, research, political research, or what have you, you're opening the legislation or the documents to any person. It doesn't have to be a registered voter. For example, you might have a student or a group of students that are doing some kind of research, and those documents would be open to them.
We understood that part. That's why previously the legislation just said public. So as a compromise, we limited it to scholarly journalistic. What we're trying to get clarity on, their concern is that the second part that says such documents to any member of the public within 10 days, because right now if they make a request, they fill out the form. We limited it. We put the law is registered voters. We're asking when they walk in, whether registered or not, and they're saying they would like this information, they're the media, and they would like it for journalistic purposes. Would this now open it still to anybody, or only for those people that said it was for journalistic purposes, because you're referencing such documents?
I think the key here is, in addition to such documents, which goes back to the requested documents for journalistic or whatever, it says such documents will be available to any member of the public. And that is where my concerns really lie. The fact that it says it will be available to any member of the public, so any member of the public can make the request to receive that information.
Through the chair to the chair. You're correct, because again, you have, if you want to limit, then you have to put in specific language to limit the documents that would be available. Because right now it's a blanket request, and the person doesn't have to be a registered voter. It does. I understand fully what you're saying. These are open-ended. I mean, I can't put it any clearer. If you don't understand, then I can't go beyond that.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much, Attorney Ayala.
And I'm not going to get in an argument with something legal. I have stated the position of the legal counsel, and I'm leaving it at that.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, briefly.
I would like to thank legal counsel, and this is not a debate, but I think he's saying that it's open to the public, and we are aware of that. I think that was the whole purpose of this, to add open-endedness to the public. So I'm not questioning what he's saying. We are opening it to the public. We are limiting it to registered voters, and there's a second sentence that opens it to the public, but the public can only come in and request it for these purposes. So if somebody walks in and says, from the public, and they're unregistered, and they say, I would like to have this because I just want it, they can't get it. If they just walk in and say, I would like to have it because I just like to collect these as souvenirs, they can't have it. They have to be able to say, I am a journalist, I am coming in here to request this information for journalistic purposes. And then it would be granted or not. That's what I'm trying to clarify.
I hear what you're saying,
Okay.
but my concern is that anyone can come there and say, I would like it.
Point of inquiry?
I would like it
Point of inquiry?
Anyone can come here and say, I would like it for journalistic purposes. Anybody off the street can come in. Any member of the public can say, look, I want it for political purposes or for journalistic purposes, and they must be granted it based on the language in the amendment. That is what my concern is. So again, it just neutralizes the impact of the supervisor of elections concerns, because it just gives carte blanche for anyone. All they have to do is say, I want it for political purposes, and they must be granted that.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead. I'll come to you in 1 second. Senator Whitaker, Legal Counsel Ayala, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, one of the ways to make sure that the senator's requests remain intact would be to perhaps within the internal affairs of the Board of Election, to have the Board of Election in the form that they produce, make it specific that documentation for the person requesting the information be identified and specified in the form, indicating that, for example, such an John Doe came in, John Doe is requested to put in some kind of ID, some kind of organization to which he belongs to, and make sure that perhaps maybe there is an oath to be taken that this information shall not, leave here or be used specifically for that. But that would be an internal section of the Board of Election.
Thank you very much for that. Senator Whitaker, you're recognized for your point of inquiry. Please recognize Senator Heyliger.
Thank you very much. I think what is not being recognized is a lot of this language comes directly out of the VI code. And the VI code, all of these listings in regards to contracts already is sitting there. So we did not attempt to change the specific things. We added some stuff, right, but we didn't change the parts about affidavits and all of that. From my recollection, and we could pull up the code, is sitting right there in the law currently. What we were attempting to do was add stuff where things could be more accessible to the public, but we really did not change a lot of the context of what already exists in the code as to what could be retrieved. And I want to put on the record, we also stress in here, as it relates to the public inspection part, that nothing in this section may be construed to require the disclosure of information that is prohibited from disclosure by law. During the last hearing, we had testimony, and we also heard a report that the Board of Elections shared with us as to sharing sensitive information. By law, you can't share. So we are fully aware, and the board is fully aware of the information that they cannot share with the public. So I, as a sponsor, don't need to list those things because the law already exists, and they, as a board, know what they can and cannot do.
Thank you very much, Senator Heyliger.
This does not open the door for me to put out personal information.
Thank you, Senator Francis Heyliger. Point of information, Senator Francis Heyliger's microphone.
Thank you so much. I just would like to thank my colleague for bringing that up, as we did share and discuss a few moments ago that we said that that could be easily altered and amended, as if that is the only issue, where we would just remove the words any member of the public, and we just, if that was the only issue, I did share with you a moment ago, I would be more than willing to amend it and have it removed before it gets to the floor.
Thank you very much.
So I wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you very much, Senator Francis Heyliger. Senator Francis Heyliger, you're recognized for your point of personal privilege.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to say thank you to my colleagues for considering these two pieces of legislation. As it relates to the Crown Act, I would like to say I appreciate the dialogue as we attempt to move this to the floor. I think this piece of legislation speaks for itself because no type of discrimination should ever be in our society, especially when it comes to anything that is God-given. As I would also like to express thank you to my colleagues that have signed on to that piece of legislation, Senator Genevieve Whitaker, Senator Marvin Blyden, Senator Johnson, and I really appreciate the support as we continue on this journey, and I look forward to a favorable vote on the Senate floor. As it relates to the second bill for elections, thank you once again for hearing me. I took into consideration what was said in our efforts to protect the public, but also give them the much needed transparency in order to deal with our election system. The only thing I will say is I will make the necessary amendments in order to guarantee or hope that this piece of legislation comes to fruition because the public wants transparency. I know this is the third time, but I guarantee you I will continue to push because I am out there, I am speaking to the public, and I know what they're asking me as their representative to do, and I am here to represent them. So thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for the time, and thank you to my colleagues for your support.
Thank you very much, Senator Francis Heyliger. Senator Francis Heyliger.
I wanted to put on the record quickly that as it relates to the invitees at the previous hearing for the Crown Act, we did attempt to reach out to the education areas, board, etc. And apparently at that time, they had something scheduled and they could not make it. In addition, that was also the same hearing they did not show up to the second part, and the Education Committee subpoenaed them. So I just don't want it to be on the record that the attempt wasn't made, but they just were not available for that day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we've exhausted today's